All right, here's the story. Um, there was a very great rabbi, and his name was Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin. I know I've told this story before, but his name was Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin. Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin was a very holy rabbi. This was in the time when it was very dangerous to be a Chassid. The Chassidic movement was just starting, and the other Chassidim, the other religious Jews, which was like 99.9% of all the Jews, they tremendously opposed these ideas of Hasidut, mainly because Judaism was doing okay. It was doing okay before that. What did you need it? Hasidut came along and said Judaism is not doing okay. There's the people who are sitting and learning Torah, and then there's the people who are not able to learn Torah. They haven't because they haven't got the time, or they haven't got the intellect, or whatever. They haven't got the opportunity. They haven't got the money, right? They have to work all the time, and those people were basically sort of second class citizens, and they didn't have the opportunity to learn Torah. Anyway, so came along the movement of Hasidut. Movement of Hasidut was teaching everybody that God is everywhere, and every Jew has to constantly improve himself, and all the Jews are the same soul, and all the Jews have the same purpose, etc. All these ideas that we learn in the morning. But there was tremendous opposition to them, and there were cases where people were Hasidim were even punished very severely by the. But there was the teacher but the teachings of Hasidut were true, and there was the Maggid of Mezrich. He had pupils, and his pupils went out and they went from city to city, town to town, and they gathered up especially young people, and they got them interested in learning the ideas of Hasidut. One such person was Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin. Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin, he was one of the older Hasidim of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he went to towns. There was one town he would go to, and the young boys would, 18 years old, 19 years, they would come and they would learn from him. At first, it started very small. He would come in the middle of the night, but eventually it became, a sizable number: 20 boys, 30 boys. Now, before he would teach them, he would go to the mikveh. By the non-Hasidim, they would never heat up the mikveh. Even women would go into a cold mikveh. A cold mikveh was supposed to go. And according to law, there's a place for that. There's definitely a place that the mikveh should be cold. There's also a place that it should be warmed up, but nevertheless, they went according to this. So in order to receive the rabbi the way he wanted, so his pupils would secretly break into the mikveh that was there, and they would make a fire, and they would warm up, boil water, and pour the boiled water into the already existing water in the mikveh. And the Rebbe then would immerse himself, and he would leave, and then they would clean the whole place up so that nobody would smell the smell, and nobody would this, and nobody would feel that it had been warmed up. And that's what they would do. And what it happened at one time, so Rabbi Shlomo would Karlin, he would come, let's say, once a year, and they would warm up the mikveh for him, and then he would teach them, give them a class for 2-3 hours. That was enough to hold them for the rest of the year, just to change their whole attitude toward Judaism and enlightenment. Well, one time they knew that he was the time when he was supposed to be coming. So the boys, again, they broke into the mikveh, they did everything as usual, and they made a fire, they boiled up the water, or maybe they brought boiled water from another place. Whatever they did, they boiled up the water and they poured it into the mikveh. But they had to do everything in total silence, and they couldn't light any lights, because if anybody found out what was going on, one of the boys happened to be that very silently, he went down into the mikveh to check if there was water, and the other boys, not knowing that he was there, poured the hot boiling water on him. So the boy that was in the mikveh let out a scream and passed out. Immediately they realized what was going on. They made a terrible mistake. They took the boy out, wrapped him up in one of the coats of one of the other boys, and they rushed him to the doctor. There was a doctor there. And meanwhile, one of the other boys remained back in the mikveh, and he cleaned it up so that nobody would see anything was there. And the boy, they put him in the doctor. At that time, about maybe 15, 20 minutes after this whole tragedy occurred, Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin, he arrived in the city. And he arrived in the city ready to give his class. What's this? Where is this coming from? Anyway, So he's ready to give his class. So he's ready to give his class. So he comes to the city. He sees that none of the boys are there. And he sees that the door of the mikveh is open. The boy was cleaning up, came out of the mikveh, locked the door. What happened? He told him the whole story that the boy was burned, and that who knows if he's still alive. He said, "Quick, take me to where the boy is at." So they took Rabbi Shlomo, this one young man took Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin to the house of the doctor, and there is this poor boy laying on the table. The doctor's like pouring water on him or something, but he realizes it's a lost case. He's got like third-degree burns on 90% of his body. It's just a matter of time till he dies. And so Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin says, "Everybody stand aside," and he closes his eyes, Rabbi Shlomo Karlin, and he passed his hand over the body, the burnt body of this boy. And where he passed his hand is it healed. Until he passed his hand over where it was healed, and then he asked the boys to turn this fellow over. They turned him over on his back or on his front, whatever it was, and he passed until after 10 minutes of this, the burnt boy was totally healthy. And he sat up and said, "What happened? Where am I? What happened? I'm thirsty. I want to drink." And he gave him to drink. Amazing miracle. A half a year later came the first Rebbe of Chabad. He was the youngest of the pupils of the Maggid of Mezrich. He also went around teaching young people. And he came to the same city, same town. And he didn't ask that they should heat the mikveh for him or whatever. He was already young. He was a young man, right? He was in his 20s. He was going around teaching. So the young boys heard this is another pupil of the Maggid of Mezrich. Let's see what he has to say. And they heard what the first Rebbe of Chabad had to say, and they all became his followers. Half a year later, returned Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin as that's his regular route. And he came to the city and they heated up the mikveh for him. And he gave his class to the young boys. It was 30 boys. But he felt when he was speaking to them that they weren't with him anymore. They weren't devoted to him as before. So he said, "I feel something is missing here. What happened? Why aren't you with me anymore?" So they were all very sheepish and they were very ashamed. And they said, "Listen, Rabbi, you're very great. You're wonderful. And you saved our lives. You brought us into Chassidic." But a half a year ago came the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shlomo of Rabbi Shneur Zalman. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman, he came and he taught us, and now we're his followers. We decided. So Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin thought for a moment and he said, "I understand it. He's a very great man. He's totally unusual. The Maggid of Mezrich said that he's like a small prophet, whatever he says is prophecy. I can understand why your souls are attached to his way of teaching. Good, I can understand it. But he pointed to the boy his life he saved. But how could you leave me? You saw what God can do for you. You saw that through me. You saw that God is working through me. You saw what God can do for you." So the young man said, "Rabbi, please, don't get angry at me. You're a great man. I owe my life to you. You opened up the doors of Chassidut to me. You changed my whole attitude toward God. It's true. You showed me what God can do for me. But the first Rebbe of Chabad, this Rabbi Shneur Zalman, he showed what I can do for God. You showed how great God is and that God can do for me. But the Rebbe showed how great God thinks I am and how much I can do for him." And that's the essence of what Chabad Chassidut is. To think only about what you can give, and that'll make the world a healthy, a happy, and a holy place. Have a good day with Mashiach now. Thank you for coming.